More than 3,000 years ago, along the mighty Nile, a boy ascended the throne of Egypt. His name was Tutankhamun. Today, it is perhaps the most famous name of all the pharaohs, yet in his own time he was an almost insignificant ruler, barely mentioned in ancient records. Without the discovery of 1922, Tutankhamun might have remained forever buried in the sands of history. He was born during one of the most turbulent periods of Egypt. Before him, Pharaoh Akhenaten, believed to be his father or uncle, had shaken the empire with a radical reform, abandoning the traditional pantheon of gods to worship only one deity, the sun disk Aten. This revolution tore Egypt apart. After Akhenaten's death, priests, nobles, and common people demanded the return of the old faith. And so, a boy named Tutankhamun, living image of Aten, was placed upon the throne. To win back the people's favor, his name was changed to Tutankhamun, living image of Ammonius, restoring the supreme god Ammonius and the traditional cults. Tutankhamun reigned less than a decade. He became king at the age of 9, his decisions controlled by powerful regents. He left no grand monuments, no victorious wars, no grand legacy, only questions. His sudden death around the age of 18 or 19 remains one of history's enduring mysteries. Some scholars believe he fell from a chariot, others point to genetic illnesses within the royal family, or even malaria. And some whisper of assassination. It was precisely his obscurity that saved him. The grand tombs of mighty rulers like Ramses II or Seti I were lavish targets for ancient tomb robbers. But Tutankhamun's burial place was modest, squeezed between larger monuments, and quickly forgotten. For over 3,000 years, his resting place remained undisturbed. In Egyptian belief, death was not an end but a beginning. A pharaoh would continue to rule in the afterlife, provided he was supplied with the objects he needed. Thus Tutankhamun's tomb was filled with more than 5,000 items: golden statues, chariots, jewelry, weapons, food, clothing, furniture, even sacred amulets. Most astonishing of all were 3 nested coffins, the innermost cast in solid gold, and the golden death mask inlaid with semi-precious stones, an icon of ancient art. But when Howard Carter broke through the sealed doorway in 1922, the world did not only see glittering gold. They also saw ominous warnings etched in stone, that death would strike down anyone who disturbed the pharaoh's eternal sleep. Was this only superstition, or the echo of something far darker? By the late 19th century, Egypt had become a paradise for European archaeologists. The Valley of the Kings had been plundered for decades. Tomb after tomb was found, most already ransacked in antiquity. Many scholars believed nothing remained to be discovered. Yet one man refused to believe that. Howard Carter, a poor boy from England who began as an artist's apprentice. He was never formally trained as an archaeologist, but he had a gift: the ability to copy ancient carvings with painstaking accuracy. This talent earned him work in Egypt, and over the years he became respected for his keen eye. But Carter's career was anything but smooth. He quarreled with superiors, lost jobs, and for years seemed destined to obscurity. Then fate introduced him to Lord Carnarvon, a wealthy English aristocrat fascinated by Egypt. Carnarvon provided the money, Carter the expertise. Together, they embarked on excavations in the Valley of the Kings. In 1915, Carter boldly proposed that the tomb of a little-known pharaoh named Tutankhamun had not yet been found. Scholars scoffed. A minor king like that? Impossible. But Carter was convinced, piecing together fragments of evidence and clues left in the valley. From 1917 to 1922, Carter's team dug relentlessly. Thousands of tons of rock and sand were cleared. Yet season after season, nothing emerged. Carnarvon grew impatient. Funding dwindled. Carter staked his entire reputation on a dream. Finally, in 1922, Carnarvon gave him one last chance. One more season of digging and then it would end. For Carter, it was now or never. And then, destiny revealed itself. In November, a worker discovered a carved step hidden beneath rubble, close to the tomb of Ramses VI. They cleared further, a staircase descending into darkness. At the bottom lay a sealed doorway, stamped with the royal insignia of Tutankhamun. Carter's hands trembled. He cabled Carnarvon in England. Weeks later, they stood side by side before that ancient seal. On November 26, 1922, Carter made a small hole, inserted a candle, and peered inside. Flickering light revealed gleaming statues, gilded chariots, and strange shapes piled high. Lord Carnarvon whispered, "Can you see anything?" Carter replied, breathless, "Yes, wonderful things." In that instant, the veil of 3,000 years was torn away. The forgotten boy king was about to shake the world. The tomb could not be opened at once. Weeks passed as Carter gathered specialists and secured permits from Egyptian authorities. The waiting only deepened the tension. Rumors spread. Journalists descended upon Luxor, sensing that history was about to unfold. On November 29, 1922, the first chamber was entered. Carter stepped into a scene out of a dream: golden statues of gods, gilded couches shaped like lions, painted chests, jewelry, weapons, furniture, chariots, thousands of artifacts, many jumbled together as if placed in haste. Under the glow of oil lamps, the chamber glittered with unimaginable wealth. Carter later said, "We were as though in some enchanted dream from the Arabian Nights." But the burial chamber itself remained sealed. Months passed as every object was carefully catalogued, photographed, and removed. All the while, whispers of a curse grew louder. Egyptian workers murmured, "He who disturbs the pharaoh's rest will die." In February 1923, the inner chamber was finally breached. Before them rose a golden shrine enclosing 4 nested shrines, each within the other like Russian dolls. Within lay 3 coffins, the last one cast entirely of solid gold, weighing over 100 kilograms. And resting within it, the face that would mesmerize the world, the golden death mask of Tutankhamun. Its obsidian eyes seemed alive, its lips curved in an eternal, mysterious smile. It was the greatest treasure ever found in the history of archaeology. But triumph was soon followed by tragedy. Just weeks later, Lord Carnarvon was bitten by a mosquito. The bite became infected. Within days, he was dead in Cairo. At the very moment of his death, the city's lights mysteriously went out. Newspapers erupted with sensational headlines, "The Curse of the Pharaoh Strikes." From that point forward, Tutankhamun's treasure was no longer just a discovery. It was a legend, shimmering with gold and shrouded in death. When the burial chamber was finally opened, the world held its breath. Before Carter's team stood a sight no human had witnessed for 3 millennia. The chamber was dominated by a massive golden shrine, nearly filling the entire room. Its panels were inscribed with protective spells, images of gods and goddesses, a spiritual fortress built to guard the boy king. Inside the shrine was another, and inside that, yet another. 4 shrines in total, each enclosing the next, layer upon layer, as if the Egyptians were determined that no living soul would ever reach the pharaoh. It took weeks of careful dismantling before the innermost shrine was revealed. There lay 3 coffins, nested within one another. The first 2 were made of gilded wood, but the last, the third, was beyond belief: solid gold, over 100 kilograms, molded to the shape of the king's body. When the coffin was opened, Carter and his colleagues finally looked upon Tutankhamun himself. The mummy's head and shoulders were covered by the most magnificent object of all, the golden death mask. Crafted of gold and inlaid with lapis lazuli, obsidian, quartz, turquoise, and carnelian, the mask glowed with an otherworldly aura. Its almond-shaped eyes seemed alive, watching. Its serene smile spoke of eternal power. This single artifact would become one of the most iconic treasures in all of human history. But the mask and coffin were only part of the splendor. The tomb contained more than 5,000 items: golden thrones, ceremonial daggers made from meteorite iron, bows, shields, jewelry, alabaster jars, model boats, musical instruments, even jars of honey that had survived 3,000 years intact. Chariots stood dismantled in corners, ready for the pharaoh's journeys in the afterlife. Food, clothing, cosmetics, toys, and games, every detail of daily life, reproduced in luxury, was buried to accompany him into eternity. It was not merely wealth. It was a library of ancient belief, a window into how the Egyptians imagined immortality. Each object was symbolic. Each charm and amulet carried prayers of protection. Each inscription a plea for safe passage to the afterlife. Tutankhamun, a king who had achieved so little in life, was in death surrounded by treasures fit for the greatest of pharaohs. The news of the discovery spread like wildfire. In 1922 and 1923, newspapers across Europe and America were filled with stories from the Valley of the Kings. The world was reeling from the First World War, desperate for wonder, for something that felt eternal and untouched by destruction. Tutankhamun provided exactly that. Journalists seized on every detail, especially the mysterious deaths associated with the excavation. The phrase, "the curse of the pharaohs," appeared in headlines. Newspapers reported, often with exaggeration, that a warning was inscribed above the tomb's entrance: "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the king's peace." Whether such words actually existed remains disputed, but it hardly mattered. The idea was irresistible. Crowds gathered outside museums in Cairo and London, demanding to see the artifacts. The Egyptian government realized instantly the power of this discovery. For a country still under British colonial control, Tutankhamun's tomb became a rallying cry for national pride. The treasures were Egyptian, and Egypt wanted the world to know it. In Europe and America, Egyptomania exploded. Fashion, art, jewelry, even movie theaters adopted motifs inspired by Tutankhamun. Women wore dresses patterned after his throne. Jazz musicians composed songs about the boy king. In Hollywood, films with Egyptian themes drew millions to cinemas. Tutankhamun had lived a short and obscure life, but in death he had become the most famous pharaoh of them all. The discovery transformed archaeology itself. No longer was it a dusty pursuit for scholars, it became a global obsession, a romantic adventure filled with treasure, mystery, and danger. Howard Carter became a household name. Photographs of the tomb's treasures, taken by Harry Burton, circulated worldwide, mesmerizing audiences with their haunting beauty. The boy king had risen from obscurity, not to rule Egypt, but to conquer the imagination of the entire planet. Yet beneath the awe and wonder, a darker story was taking shape. On April 5, 1923, just months after the tomb was opened, Lord Carnarvon died in Cairo. A mosquito bite on his cheek had become infected after he accidentally shaved over it. Sepsis spread rapidly. Within days, he was gone. At the exact moment of his death, the lights in Cairo mysteriously went out. Across the city, dogs howled. The press seized on the story. "The curse of Tutankhamun," screamed headlines. Reporters claimed that when Carnarvon died, his pet dog in England let out a terrible howl and collapsed dead. Others whispered that his wound was in the same spot as a cut on Tutankhamun's mummy. Carnarvon was only the first. Over the next decade, several others connected to the tomb died suddenly or mysteriously. George J. Gould, a wealthy visitor to the excavation, contracted a fever and died shortly after. Prince Ali Camel Fahmy of Egypt was shot dead in London. Arthur Mace, a member of Carter's team, fell ill and never recovered. Even the radiologist who first x-rayed the mummy died soon after. Newspapers compiled lists. By the late 1930s, more than 20 deaths were attributed to the curse. Skeptics dismissed it as coincidence. But believers pointed to the sheer number, the eerie timing, the pattern that seemed undeniable. The legend grew that ancient priests had placed a spell upon the tomb, ensuring that anyone who disturbed the pharaoh would meet a dreadful fate. Whether true or not, the myth became inseparable from the treasure itself. Howard Carter, curiously, lived another 16 years, working tirelessly to catalog every artifact. He died peacefully in 1939, seemingly untouched by the curse. Yet even his death fed the legend. Some said the pharaoh had waited, biding his time. The curse haunted popular imagination. Novels, plays, films, even horror stories drew upon it. To this day, tourists visiting Tutankhamun's treasures often speak in hushed tones, as if the young king's wrath still lingers in the shadows. Perhaps it was mold spores, toxins, or simple coincidence. Or perhaps, some mysteries are meant never to be fully explained. As the legend of the pharaoh's curse grew, so too did the attempts to explain it. Scientists and skeptics dismissed the idea of ancient magic, offering rational explanations. Some pointed to the environment of the tomb itself. Sealed for millennia, the chambers may have harbored deadly molds or bacteria. When the tomb was first opened, spores disturbed from centuries of darkness could have entered the lungs of those present. Aspergillus mold, for example, can cause fatal infections in weakened immune systems. Poisonous gases such as formaldehyde, hydrogen sulfide, or ammonia might have accumulated within the sealed chambers. A single inhalation could sicken or even kill. Others suggested psychological causes. The mere belief in a curse might have triggered fear and stress, weakening the body's defenses. In the early 20th century, medicine was far less advanced. Infections that are easily treated today were often fatal then. Still, there were puzzling details. Why did some die suddenly, while others lived long lives? Howard Carter himself, the man most exposed to the tomb, lived until 1939. Could chance alone explain the pattern? Or was there something beyond human comprehension? Believers held fast. They noted strange coincidences: the extinguishing of Cairo's lights at Carnarvon's death, the mysterious collapse of his dog in England at the same moment. They whispered that Tutankhamun's spirit demanded vengeance. Even decades later, when CT scans and DNA studies attempted to solve the riddle of Tutankhamun's own death, speculation about the curse refused to fade. Science could not extinguish the allure of the unknown. For many, the boy king remained more powerful in death than in life. The treasures of Tutankhamun were not merely relics, they were symbols of power. From the moment of their discovery, a struggle erupted over who owned them. Lord Carnarvon, as financier, had hoped for a share of the artifacts, as was common in earlier digs. But the Egyptian government, stirred by a growing nationalist movement, refused. Egypt was still under British occupation, and many Egyptians saw the boy king's tomb as a chance to reclaim dignity. How could the wealth of their ancestors be shipped abroad? Tense negotiations followed. In the end, Egypt retained all of the treasures. Carter and his team were allowed to study and document them, but the objects themselves remained in Cairo. This marked a turning point. No longer would foreign archaeologists carry away Egypt's heritage. Tutankhamun's discovery ignited a sense of cultural pride that fueled Egypt's independence movement in the 1920s and 1930s. Meanwhile, the artifacts began to travel the world in carefully curated exhibitions. Crowds in London, Paris, New York, and later Tokyo and Sydney queued for hours to see the Golden Mask. These exhibitions became the most visited museum shows in history, drawing millions. The treasures generated not only wonder, but enormous revenue. Tutankhamun became a symbol both of Egypt's glorious past and its struggle to control its own identity. In the global imagination, he embodied eternal wealth and mystery. In Egypt itself, he became a rallying point for sovereignty and pride. The boy king, once forgotten, had become a figure of immense power, not through conquest or decree, but through the silent majesty of his tomb. A century after Howard Carter first peered into the tomb, the treasures of Tutankhamun still cast their spell. Few archaeological finds have had such a lasting impact on culture. In the arts, Tutankhamun's golden mask inspired painters, sculptors, and architects. In fashion, the motifs of ancient Egypt, the lotus, the scarab, the falcon, became iconic after the 1920s. Hollywood embraced the mystique, producing films like The Mummy that drew directly from the discovery. Even in music, jazz songs and later rock bands paid tribute to the boy king. In academia, the tomb provided a treasure trove of information. It showed how Egyptians lived, dressed, ate, and worshipped. For the first time, scholars could study a royal burial almost completely intact. The discovery reshaped our understanding of Egyptian history. Tourism to Egypt flourished. The Valley of the Kings became a pilgrimage site for millions. Cairo's Egyptian Museum turned into a global landmark, with Tutankhamun's mask its greatest attraction. When traveling exhibitions toured the world in the late 20th century, they broke attendance records in every city. Even beyond culture, Tutankhamun influenced ideas about immortality. The boy who died young achieved eternal fame, proving that memory can outlast empires. And still, the fascination continues. Each new scan of the mummy, each new analysis of DNA or CT images, makes headlines worldwide. People remain captivated by his face, his treasures, his story. Tutankhamun is no longer just a historical figure. He has become a timeless myth. For all that we have learned, Tutankhamun remains an enigma. His life was short, his reign unremarkable, yet his afterlife has been extraordinary. Still, questions linger. How exactly did he die? CT scans revealed a fractured skull and broken bones, fueling theories of murder or accident. DNA evidence showed malaria parasites, suggesting illness. Yet no single cause has been proven. Was he crippled by genetic disease, the result of royal inbreeding? Did he fall from a chariot in battle? Or was he assassinated, a pawn in palace intrigue? And what of the tomb itself? Was it truly meant for Tutankhamun, or was it a tomb hastily adapted from someone else's, perhaps even a queen's? Its small size and unusual design raise questions. Could there still be hidden chambers undiscovered behind the walls? In recent years, radar scans have hinted at voids that may conceal further secrets. Then there is the curse. Rational minds dismiss it as coincidence or superstition. Yet stories of sudden deaths, strange coincidences, and eerie accidents persist. Even in the modern world, visitors often feel a shiver when standing before the golden mask, as if the boy king's gaze still carries power. Perhaps the greatest mystery of all is why Tutankhamun's tomb, alone among so many, remained nearly intact. Was it luck, chance, or fate? Did the gods themselves preserve it for us, so that thousands of years later humanity could rediscover the glory of Egypt? The story of Tutankhamun is one of paradoxes. A forgotten king who became the most famous. A modest tomb that held the richest treasure. A dead boy who outlived empires. And so, we return to the question. If you stood before a sealed door in the Valley of the Kings, a door that had not been opened in 3,000 years, a door whispering of treasure and curse alike, would you dare to open it?